The question is Josh Frydenberg going to make a return to politics? Well, the answer isn't so simple. It's not a no, but it's certainly not a yes at this stage. So, would he be welcome back? Joining me now is the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. Would he be?
Of course he would. Josh was a former treasurer of this country and contributed greatly during one of our greatest crises through COVID-19. Kept many businesses in business. But this ultimately comes down to, firstly, a decision for him and his family. And then secondly, the pre-selectors in Kooyong. Ultimately, they're the ones that give the gift of the candidate. And I think it comes down to them. The decision they'll have to make is who's best to represent them and our nation in this parliament. It's a great privilege to have. And I think what they'll want to do also is look at through the lens of who can win the seat, because if we don't win the seat of Kooyong, then you get Anthony Albanese for another 3 years. It's as simple as that. Monique Ryan is not going to support Peter Dutton and the coalition. She is simply going to hold out, and you've got to ask yourself, you live in Kooyong, are you better today than what you were 2 years ago under Monique Ryan's representation?
Yeah, well, look, they're all pretty good questions, but I think, you know, Josh Frydenberg has said publicly and privately, never say never. But politics is about timing. Is now the right time?
Well, the thing about politics is it's never the perfect timing for any individual, whether it be for family matters or whether it be around pre-selection and timing thereof. Circumstances change, and obviously the redistribution changes much of the dynamic. So you've got to work through that through the lens of, is this your opportunity? And if it is, while the timing may not be perfect from a professional and family sense, there may not be another opportunity. And what you don't want to do, as I say to any prospective candidate that thinks about running to be a candidate for a party, is that don't have regrets on the Sunday after election day thinking,
that's right.
I should have put my hand up, because it'll eat away at you for some time. So my only advice is to make sure you have no regrets.
Look, it's interesting to see Redbridge Group, I speak to on a weekly basis, and Cos Samaras has essentially warned the Liberals not to get ahead of themselves, even though Higgins is wiped out and 30% of those voters then go into the Kooyong boundaries. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be Liberal voters. In fact, that dynamic there really hasn't changed all that much. I know you're a Queenslander, but do you have a bit of a read on that?
Oh, you do, but I think the last election, we were a tied government. We had an unpopular Prime Minister that is no longer hanging around our neck. I think that we now have an unpopular Labor Prime Minister, and where the choice is that we will have to clearly articulate.
You don't
if
think,
they want to
is
keep
Albo
Anthony
quite
Albanese
as unpopular as ScoMo was at the time, though? Are they really like for like at this point, do you think?
Well, I think you can see that the cost of living crisis that Australians are feeling wasn't made by Vladimir Putin. It was made right here by him in Canberra. And when you look at the challenges we've got around safety of detainees that have been left out, that was created right here in Canberra because he sold out our national security to Jacinta Ardern. Yeah. He gave her preference over our own national security. I think it's starting to bite, and people are starting to feel that after 2 years, they don't feel better off. They don't feel safer, and that's the primary question, and that's the primary responsibility in government, is keep its people safe and to make it prosperous. And after 2 years, Anthony Albanese hasn't been able to achieve that. So I think you'll find that there is a mood that's starting to change, but we will clearly have to enunciate our policies, as we will in the coming months, to articulate a different vision and a different direction for Australia.
The minimum wage decision is in less than an hour now. The Fair Work Commission will hand down this yearly decision. The business want a 2% wage rise. Unions want about 5%. Is somewhere in the middle about right, David Littleproud?
Yeah, I think where the Fair Work Commission gets to will be about right. They have to take the totality of the economy. And I think while there's ambit claims both sides, they need to understand what's being flooded into this economy, the extra spending this government has put into it, plus the temporary measures that have been put in place, not just by the federal government, but by state governments around the country that are up for election, trying to give sweeteners. Because if we don't attack inflation, then unfortunately this will all be in vain. And we got to get back to basics. And that's what we're saying. You can't keep spending Australian taxpayers' money to solve the nation's problems. Sometimes you've got to have sensible solutions. This government spent over $6.5 billion in trying to give you the $275 reduction in your electricity bill, and they've only increased it. So this is about making sure we get inflation under control, and the Fair Work Commission plays an important role in this, and they should be left to make that decision and that determination with independence.
If the cost of living crisis is all the Labor government's fault, I imagine that once we do see, or if we do see interest rate cuts, should they get some credit as well?
Well, you've got a higher interest rate for longer because of the money that they pumped into the economy. That's the stark reality of what they've done. They've failed to actually address the fundamentals of what's driving up inflation, which is your energy bill, which is your food bill.
Well, they did address that, didn't they? Even if they did it artificially.
But ultimately, Australian taxpayers' money runs out. And unless you actually address the fundamentals behind a failing energy system, that also means you're going to have to pump in billions of dollars in subsidies to keep manufacturing in this country, when many are packing up and going. Look at Cadbury and Mars have said, you know what, we can't afford the power bills here anymore, we're out, and we don't have the reliable power that we need. Then if you don't address baseload power with an affordable solution, and you go down an all renewables approach, then fundamentally you haven't shifted anything, and you're going to have to continually to fundamentally put money in to manufacturing to keep it here, which ultimately runs out because Australian taxpayers' wallets only can go so far.
David, always good to talk to you. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.